The first live-action version of Disney's Beauty and the Beast is just around the corner, but it's unique for more than one reason. The film will feature Disney's first openly gay character. LeFou, the comical sidekick to the self-obsessed Gaston, is played by actor Josh Gad. Gad took to Twitter February 28th, saying he was beyond proud to represent the LGBTQ community in the film. Director Bill Condon told Attitude magazine, quote, "LeFou's confused about what he wants, and Josh makes something really subtle and delicious out of it. It is a nice, exclusively gay moment in a Disney movie." Some social media users, however, have criticized Disney for its first out gay character being LeFou, whose name in French means the fool, while others have renewed the hashtag boycott Disney over the news. You can see the film for yourself when it hits theaters March 17th. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell.
While everyone is deciding what to think about a man who seems to be exploring his feelings for another man on the big screen, Disney already snuck in, with little fanfare, the first real gay moment on Monday. A Disney XD cartoon displayed images of homosexual kissing. There's people speculating that the intent of Disney's writers and animators is to make homosexuality seem like a normal, acceptable way of life, rather than taboo, which is a strong political stance to make.
On Friday, New York's chief law enforcement officer has said that 19 attorneys general have signed on to a brief to the Supreme Court to show support of a transgender teenager who wants to use the boys' bathroom at his Virginia high school. The court brief cited the shared experience among the states that allow transgender people to use bathrooms matching their gender identity, saying it creates no public safety, privacy, or financial burdens. The brief supports high school senior Gavin Grimm, who is challenging his school board's policy that prohibits him from using the boys' bathroom at school, which he says matches his chosen gender.
Finland's same-sex couples can finally marry and adopt. In February, Finland voted to uphold the same-sex marriage law after more than 100,000 people signed a petition to stop the law taking effect. It is now confirmed the country's marriage equality law comes into effect March 1st. Finland is the last Nordic country to make marriage equality legal. The new law expands from the existing same-sex unions. That gives couples the right to take each other's surname and makes them eligible to adopt children. According to Pink News, same-sex Finns hoping for a church wedding may be waiting a while though, as Finland's dominant religious institution has reaffirmed its opposition to equality marriage. But that news isn't putting a dampener on things. According to a local register office figures, some 41 couples across the country are scheduled to marry in the first week. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Attorney generals from 18 states have signed a brief in support of a transgender teenager. The young man wants to use the boys' bathroom at his Virginia high school. According to New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, the friend of the court brief was filed with the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday night. Its argument is that allowing transgender people to use bathrooms matching their gender identity creates neither public safety nor financial burdens. Gavin Grimm is supported in the brief in a lawsuit against the school board in Virginia's Gloucester County. The Supreme Court is scheduled to hear arguments March 28th.
Yelp, the crowdsourced company specializing in online reviews, is wading into the national debate over transgender people's bathroom access. They are releasing a new feature that will enable consumers to search for businesses offering gender-neutral restrooms. In a blog post on Friday, Yelp said it would collect information from both customers and business owners in order to add a gender-neutral restrooms category to its listings. Rachel Williams, Yelp's head of diversity since November 2014, said, "The hope is that this feature gets business owners thinking about how they're presenting themselves, who they're supporting, and why." Williams continues on to say, "Maybe it will start some conversations." She said the idea for the new feature came from employees in Yelp's product section who were incensed by efforts in some parts of the U.S. to curtail transgender people's civil rights. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker said on Friday that his state plans to plug any holes in the budget of the state's chapter of Planned Parenthood if the U.S. Congress moves to block the use of Medicaid funds for treatment at the Women's Healthcare Organization. U.S. laws already prohibit federal money from being used for abortion, but currently allow the Medicaid Low-Income Health Program to cover other services such as screening and treatment for cancers and sexually transmitted diseases. Those funds cover treatments for some 10,000 patients a year, about a third of its total annual patients.
The continent of Antarctica officially has a new record high temperature of 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Bear in mind, the Antarctic is cold, windy and dry. The average annual temperature ranges from minus 76 Fahrenheit to 14 Fahrenheit. The World Meteorological Organization announced the record temperature March 1st of this year, but the record was actually set on March 24th, 2015. It's not uncommon for the world weather and climate records to take years to verify. According to Science Daily, Randy Chavini of Arizona State University said that observing the extremes of what the polar regions are experiencing can provide a better picture of the planet's interlinked weather system. The previous high temperature was recorded in 1974 at 59 degrees Fahrenheit. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Floods in Zimbabwe have killed nearly 250 and left thousands homeless. According to the Zimbabwean government, the flooding has caused 246 deaths since December and left nearly 2,000 without homes. Harare declared the flooding a national disaster this week. Zimbabwe has appealed to the international community for $100 million to help recover from the damage. According to the BBC, the heavy rains followed a severe drought, and the high waters have so far washed away bridges and roads and isolated communities from their surroundings. Al Jazeera reported that the transport minister said, quote, "The state of our roads has further deteriorated to the extent that some sections have become impassable." According to the New Zimbabwe news outlet, the Minister for Environment, Water and Climate said more than $12 million is needed to repair dams and infrastructure to supply clean water to the more than 100,000 people who don't currently have access to it. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Amber Caldwell.
Scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency warn that pollution from East Asia may be causing smog along the west coast of the United States. NPR reported that air currents move nitrogen oxides from polluted capitals such as Beijing across the Pacific Ocean. Sunlight then breaks down nitrogen oxide to produce ozone. Scientists say that the circulation of harmful gases offset gains in the U.S. air quality that have come from cutting nitrogen oxide emissions by 50%.
A massive sewage spill in the Tijuana River has contaminated water in the San Diego area. Dozens of South Bay residents attended an International Boundaries Water Commission meeting March 2nd, demanding answers and action on the matter. About 143 million gallons of raw sewage is estimated to have contaminated the Tijuana River, reaching waters off the coast of Imperial Beach and causing a foul stench in the area. The commission says the spill happened in Mexico during a project to repair a sewer pipe at the junction of the Alamar and Tijuana rivers. The spill happened on February 6th, and San Diego's NBC7 reports many residents at the meeting were concerned the sewage wasn't recaptured before it reached the ocean. The city has filed an official complaint with the U.S. government. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
On Thursday, the mayor of Calais, the French port city which had become a flashpoint in Europe's 2015 refugee crisis, signed a ban on gatherings that effectively prevents aid groups from distributing food to migrants and refugees still living in the city. Calais Mayor Natasha Bouchard, a member of the Conservative Republican Party, issued the decree to Calais authorities, which forbids any public gatherings, claiming that food distribution to migrants in the area has led to massive crowds and increased tensions. Just 4 months after the so-called jungle camp was demolished, the new decree is part of a campaign to prevent any new makeshift refugee camps from forming.
Confirmed by the DHS to CNN on Friday, the Department of Homeland Security is considering a proposal to separate children from adults when they are trying to enter the country illegally at the southern border. The officials said that the proposal is meant to deter the exploitation of children. They're trying to find ways to deter the use of children in illegal immigration. He went on to say that we are seeing kids essentially kidnapped and used to get here and stay. If separated from their parents, the children will be moved elsewhere under protected status.
According to a report by Reuters, the brutal, long-lasting recession which has struck Venezuela has worsened shortages of vital medicines, ranging from painkillers to chemotherapy drugs. However, with 85 out of every 100 medicines now missing in Venezuela, anticonvulsants are among the toughest drugs to find. Caracas-based support organization LIVECE claimed that an estimated 2 to 3 million Venezuelans suffer from epilepsy at some point in their lives. Due to untreated convulsions, progress has evaporated for otherwise functional people and those with severe disabilities who had managed to improve their mobility or speech.
Experts have argued for decades over when to cut a newborn's umbilical cord. Now, more health organizations are starting to recommend delaying cord clamping. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recently advised medical professionals to wait at least 30 to 60 seconds before clamping and cutting. Throughout a pregnancy, the umbilical cord carries important nutrients and blood from the mother to the baby. A growing body of research shows that both full-term and preterm infants may benefit from this additional blood volume. Experts say this can improve development, especially for babies born early. As part of a new military campaign started under the Obama administration, the United States is stepping up its efforts in Yemen. According to a Department of Defense official, the recent raids in the country are part of an effort to combat al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAD. The terrorist organization has been taking advantage of the civil war currently occurring in Yemen by capturing heavy weapons from the government and going town to town robbing banks in order to recruit fighters.
Sweden will reintroduce the draft amid falling volunteer rates and rising tension in the Baltic region. On March 2nd, Defense Minister Peter Hultqvist announced that conscription will apply to people born in 1999 or later. This will ultimately result in the call-up of 4,000 people each year in 2018 and 2019. Conscription was formally abolished in 2010 when Sweden's military needs were met by volunteers, but enrollment has since declined and Russian activity has increased tensions in the region. The United States has also contributed to concerns. According to Bloomberg, Swedish Foreign Minister Margot Wallström told the Svenska Dagbladet newspaper that talk by President Donald Trump of military buildup and nuclear rearmament was, quote, very worrying. According to the Associated Press, the Swedish government, which has called itself feminist, said, quote, modern conscription is gender neutral and will include both women and men. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell. The Filipino Army plans to recruit tens of thousands of soldiers this year to step up its fight against militant groups. The Army is looking for nearly 14,000 men and women to fill new positions in various Army units across the country to meet a quota set by the President. Positions are needed in infantry, artillery, engineering, communication, logistics, and administration. Army Commanding General Lieutenant General Glorioso Miranda said March 1st that of the 13,910 recruits, most will be enlisted as personnel, while 3,600 soldiers will replace retiring Army members and over 1,000 will be assigned to the new 54th Engineering Brigade. Miranda said 349 officers are also needed. Pay starts at nearly 17,000 pesos a month. Any natural-born Filipino citizen between 18 and 23 years old, at least 5 feet tall, single, and childless can apply. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell.
President Trump addressed troops and shipbuilders aboard a soon-to-be-commissioned Navy aircraft carrier Thursday and promised a, quote, great rebuilding of our military might. On March 2nd, Trump traveled to Newport News, Virginia to pitch his plans for a substantial increase in the defense budget. Hundreds of sailors and shipyard workers waited for hours to hear Trump speak. Trump praised the Navy's newest $17 billion carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, calling it, quote, a monument of American might that will provide the strength necessary to ensure peace. Trump also touted his proposed $84 billion increase in the defense budget over the next 2 years, which he said would help fund a major expansion of our entire Navy fleet, including having the 12-carrier Navy we need. Currently, the Navy has 10 aircraft carriers. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Reuters reports that an armed faction entered a major Libyan oil terminal in a nearby airport on Friday after attacking forces that have controlled the terminals since September, officials and residents said. The terminals at Es Sider and Ras Lanaf are two of Libya's largest, with potential combined production capacity of about 600,000 barrels per day. The new uncertainty over their status could be a blow to Libya's hopes of further reviving its oil production. It was unclear who controlled the ports late on Friday. There was no statement from the Libyan National Oil Corporation in Tripoli, which reopened the ports after the eastern-based Libyan National Army took them over 7 months. Prior to this year's Super Bowl, a news story shared on multiple websites is now being revealed to have been a fake news report. CBS News Online reports that a story indicating the seizure of thousands of pounds of imported rat meat being passed off as chicken wings was false. The fake news story also mentioned an FDA warning about 300,000 pounds of rat meat that was possibly still in circulation as Super Bowl parties approached. Peter Castle, spokesman for the FDA, speaking to AP News, said that the agency is not aware of the seizure of rat meat referenced, and the FDA never issued such a warning.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission has reportedly granted emergency temporary waivers to Jewish community centers and the telecommunications carriers that serve them, with hopes of locating those who have threatened them over the phone, the agency said Friday. Jewish community centers and schools in 13 states have reported receiving bomb threats this year, a cause for fear of a resurgence of anti-Semitism. Senator Charles Schumer, a New York Democrat, Wednesday urged the waiver to be granted to access phone numbers previously used to initiate threats and help bring criminals to justice. Former journalist Juan Thompson is behind at least 8 of the many threats made against Jewish institutions nationwide. This included a bomb threat to New York's Anti-Defamation League. Officials say he made the threats in an effort to harass and vilify his former girlfriend. Thompson was arrested in St. Louis and will appear in federal court in Missouri on a charge of cyberstalking. Federal officials have been investigating 122 bomb threats called into almost 100 Jewish community center schools and other facilities in 36 states.
As reported by the Red Cross on Friday, the number of civilians escaping the fighting in Mosul has increased significantly as battles intensify between U.S.-backed Iraqi forces and Islamic State militants, and some have been exposed to chemical agents. Iraqi armed forces, meanwhile, said they had captured another district as they push towards the densely packed old city center, where the fighting is expected to become tougher. Among casualties in the past 48 hours, 5 children and 2 women were treated for exposure to chemical agents, suffering blisters, eye redness, vomiting, and coughing. The United States has warned that the Islamic State could use weapons containing sulfur mustard agents to repel the offensive on the northern Iraq.
A structure resembling a mouse embryo using 2 types of stem cells and a 3D scaffold has been successfully created by researchers at the University of Cambridge. The resulting artificial embryo closely resembles the real thing. Lead researcher Magdalena Zernica Gates explained it has anatomically correct regions that develop in the right place at the right time. The researchers, however, say it's unlikely the artificial version would be able to develop further into a healthy fetus. It lacks a 3rd type of stem cell, which generates the yolk sac that nourishes the embryo and creates a network of blood vessels. The Pawnee Nation filed a lawsuit Friday in tribal court in Oklahoma against 27 oil and gas producers, seeking damages for an earthquake they said was caused from man-made activity related to fracking. The Native American group claimed that wastewater injected into disposal wells helped trigger a 5.8 magnitude earthquake in September, the strongest on record in the state. It damaged several Pawnee Nation buildings, including several that are more than 100 years old. Lawyers for the Pawnee Nation said they believe the case is the first of its sort filed in a tribal court. They're seeking at least $250,000 in damages.
The British government announced that sex education will be compulsory for students at every English school starting in 2019. The government is proposing the introduction of the new subject of relationships education for age 11 and under, and for children 12 and over, renaming the school subject Relationships and Sex Education to emphasise the central importance of healthy relationships. March 1st, the government tabled amendments to the Children and Social Work Bill, which will make it a requirement that all children over the age of 12 in England learn about relationships and sex education. According to the BBC, the education of safe and healthy relationships will start with children from the age of 4. Education Secretary Justine Greening said, quote, "Children will also be taught at an appropriate age about sex, but parents will still have the right to withdraw their children from these classes." For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
The Department of Homeland Security is considering a proposal to separate immigrant mothers and their children who are caught together crossing the U.S. border illegally. The proposal would be a stark change from current practice, which allows families that are fighting deportation to be released and remain together until their cases are resolved. The proposed policy, first reported Friday by Reuters, would allow border officials to hold parents in custody while their children are placed into the protective custody of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Members of the European Parliament make it a lot harder for United States citizens to visit countries in the EU. According to Elle, on Thursday, members of the European Parliament voted to temporarily reimpose visa requirements on U.S. citizens visiting the EU. If the policy goes into effect, U.S. citizens will have to apply for extra documents to travel to the EU. U.S. citizens can currently travel to any country in the European Union without a visa, but the same can't be said in reverse. Citizens of some Eastern European countries still need a visa for U.S. travel. The European Commission hinted that it will not likely act on the Parliament's non-binding vote, and it's exploring a diplomatic